Welcome everyone to the Community Forum series, where we address topics of relevance that are impacting us economically, civically, and personally. We want to make sure that we give people a voice and the community the opportunity to engage on issues that are impacting us from an equitable standpoint in regard to workforce development, entrepreneurship, and education. My name is Wesley Alexander. I'm the CEO of CoBiz Richmond, a new co-working business incubator space located in downtown Richmond, California. And we're doing this in collaboration with no better than social entrepreneur and host of a podcast called Future of Our Work, Alfredo Matthew III. Today's topic is really around the CARES Act and addressing what is the impact of it and what are some of the opportunities that we can tap into to make sure that it delivers and touches people who are in need. So with that said, let's get started. Thank you to all the panelists. I'm happy to have you guys here today from New York to California. People with great expertise and insights, change agents, people who care. So if you wouldn't mind, starting with Alfredo Matthew, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us, what you're working on and why is it important to you?
Sure. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to my fellow panelists for joining us today. I know it's not easy to make the time. Folks aren't sleeping, working around the clock. Thanks to the people that I see, attendees out there. There's some really great people. And it's important that we come together and we stay informed. This kind of grew out of, I've been going to CoBiz. I launched a business at the beginning of the year called Working World LLC. I've been in education and workforce development about 20 years. And I'm just always looking to, be more impactful and more purpose-driven. And I joined CoBiz, and they have a great creative space. And it really inspired me to start a podcast and start telling my story. And it's really not just my story, but bringing out other people's stories. And how do we collectively elevate each other's voices? And so really thankful to CoBiz for creating this space. And even as this pandemic is hit and we've all made a transition, CoBiz continues to be a resource and a support to me. And when I was kind of like, I had this idea like, hey, how do we get more voices out? Wesley just jumped on it and he put this initial panel together. And I'm just so thrilled that we're here and we're going to continue doing this every Friday with different themes. So really happy that you all are the inaugural group, but this is something we really want to keep moving forward. And I just think that we all have a duty to support one another in building social impact. And so that's why I'm here today.
Thank you. Uche, would you mind sharing who you are and your purpose of being here today?
Sure, absolutely. First, let me begin by saying thank you, Wesley, for putting this together. Obviously, we're in a very strange time in our country, in our communities, in our society that I don't think we've seen this in our lifetime. But so I'm the senior district field rep for Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks. And our district covers some part of Oakland all the way to Hercules. So it's a very large district in California, AD15. And so I cover very broad issue areas for the Assemblywoman, including workforce development, education, nonprofits, social services, labor union. So a lot of very, very broad issue areas that I cover, including small business. Let me remember to say that about business community. And I also have served on Richmond Workforce Board for a little bit over 7 years now. So obviously, workforce is something that is very important to me personally, and it's also, we're in a time in our country now that everyone is scared and not knowing where their paycheck will be coming from, if they will have food on the table, so, and education. So there's a lot of uncertainty at this point in our community. So I'm excited to lend my voice, my expertise in this area to figure out solutions. So I'm excited.
Thank you. We're happy to have you here. And all the way from New York, I'd like to welcome Christina. Would you mind introducing yourself and your reason for being a part of this panel?
Sure, absolutely. So Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Dozier, and I live in the village of Harlem in New York City. I've been here for a decade in 2019, and so I've been involved in social justice issues and community development issues in a variety of ways since I've lived here. I worked for a bank's community development corporation. I've done work at a housing policy think tank. I've worked with unions, with grassroots organizations. I worked with the city in their Department of Homeless Services. And currently, for the past 2.5 years, I have been chief of staff for a state senator in New York who covers Harlem, East Harlem, and the Upper West Side. And so in that space, deal with a large variety of issues going from small business, MWBE support, educational justice, food justice, voting rights, economic justice, just kind of everything covers that. And so New York is, you know, just really deep in the coronavirus pandemic. We have the most cases that any other state has in the nation. And so since we have been on pause and this has been going on, I've been on numerous calls on a state level, on a federal level, on a city level, trying to figure out how we can bring relief and support to people. And so it is so critical in this moment that the government step up and support people and fill gaps and do some of the work that they should have been doing anyway. And so that's why this conversation is so important to me, because when we think about who government is supposed to be serving and who government is supposed to be looking out for, it is the people, right? And so we need to make sure that every economic stimulus package has that as its core and its heart and its center.
Awesome. We appreciate your time and the work that you do. So thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.
Karen, I'd like to welcome you as well to the panel. Will you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and why you're here today?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's such a pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Karen Fleshman. I'm the founder of Racy Conversations. We're a workshop facilitation company, and our mission is to inspire the first anti-racist generation. So what do I mean by that? 47% of US Gen Z identify as people of color, 43% of millennials identify as people of color. So I'm trying to reach and flip 10% of the white people in those generations anti-racist, so we can have a majority anti-racist generation and transform our society for the better of everyone. I'm also working on a book, White Women, We Need to Talk, doing our part to end racism. Because that's my other big target demographic, is reaching white moms like me who are like really key in the perpetuation of racism and get us to change our narrative for ourselves and for our kids. So how I came to this work, the early part of my career was in the immigrants' rights movement. I actually served in New York City for the Department of Youth and Community Development, helping immigrants become citizens. And then after 9/11, our program was defunded. That was right around the time reports came out that said 50% of Black men in New York City don't have a job. And we have almost 200,000 young adults, almost entirely Black and Latinx, who are not in school, not working. And I completely shifted focus to workforce development. I thought the answer was connections to employers and internships and outreach. And I dedicated my career for 10 years to that, left the city to work for a great organization called Year Up. Year Up works with young adults 18 to 24 who don't have a college degree and prepares them for corporate careers in tech. Moved to the Bay Area, saw the exact same trends here as in New York City, limitless career opportunities for white college educated people like me moving to the Bay and gentrifying and pushing out the Black and brown people who were born and raised here. And then like 5 years ago, hearing so many stories from Europe graduates about how grateful they are for their incomes and their lifestyles, being able to work in these tech companies, but how being the only Black woman or the only Black man, as far as the eye could see, they were subject to nonstop abuse from their managers, from their colleagues, and it was really detrimental to their health, emotional well-being, and everything else. I had the light bulb went off. I have spent my entire career working in communities of color when I should have been focused on white people this entire time. White people, we are the problem. So that was when I had my major shift, and why I focus on transforming workplaces.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen, for your transparency, your honesty, and the work that you do as well. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm also loving all the New York connection here. I'm a New Yorker too. So, and Wesley's East Coast too. So I like this cross coast connection.
Yes, indeed. Orion, love to welcome you to the panelists as well, and love for you to share who you are and your reason for being here today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Orion Willis. I work for San Francisco's Office of Economic and Workforce Development, specifically on a team called Tech SF, where we fund a series of tech training programs to upskill people and get them competitive for local careers in the tech workforce. I've been on this team for about 3.5 years, and prior to that, I worked at the Mission Economic Development Agency, focusing on kind of general job readiness, you know, specifically for the Latino population in the mission, trying to fight gentrification, et cetera. And I also serve on Richmond's Economic Development Commission. So, you know, I'm at a part of this conversation because I think we're all trying to figure out best practices around providing continuity of services in this extremely challenging climate. And then, you know, unique to this conversation is, you know, how this stimulus package affects the folks we serve. And how we can kind of strategize around it and maybe prepare for, you know, future iterations of this bill. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Orion. And keep up the great work.
Yeah, right.
So, so with that said, I'd like to know from the panelists, what was your immediate response to the stimulus package and why? I know some people felt a sense of this is exactly what we needed. Some people felt a little frustrated, wide range of thoughts. I'd like to start with you, Orion, if you wouldn't mind with sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, so, you know, I have to admit I didn't read all 800 pages of the package. But, you know, from the kind of cursory review that I did do, you know, prior to this conversation, you know, I think my response is mixed. There were some really positive elements, I feel, you know, around some of the stabilization efforts for education, both primary and post-secondary. I thought that there was some good stuff in there around reauthorization of training for healthcare workers in response to, you know, preparing, you know, providing some resilience for the country right now, but then also preparing us for future public health crises. Being a workforce development professional, there's also a good chunk of money in there for dislocated workers. And I thought that was, you know, very reassuring. And then I think some of the downsides to that is, you know, I focus primarily on people who are currently under or unemployed. So because you've been dislocated from work, I think we obviously need to spend a lot of money and emphasis getting those folks retooled and connected to the labor market again. But, you know, that segment of folks who were not working prior to this crisis, I'm most concerned about them right now, and I want to see additional investments going to supporting them. And then also another thing that was slightly disheartening was seeing how much money was going to bail out large corporations. Basic math I saw was that there was nearly 20 times more money going to bail out corporations than invested into safety net issues, and 3 times more money going to bail out corporations than to support public health efforts. So definitely a mixed response. Some good and some bad.
Understand, appreciate that. Alfredo, any insights from your perspective?
I mean, when this debate was taking place, you know, I view this first and foremost as, right, we have a natural disaster on our hands. And so we need emergency relief. And the way emergency relief should happen is it should be fast, and it should go to like the front lines. And, you know, states and counties and local governments right now, and I'm sure Uche and Christina can really speak to this, they're being overwhelmed. And so in this stimulus bill, I would have loved to seen more focus on resources to help the people on the front lines. And how are we going to get there quicker? You know, it is great that there was a one-time payment to folks earning less than $99,000, really less than $75,000. But that one-time payment, that $1,200 one check, how is that going to really address those systemic gaps that were already there beforehand, right? And if you didn't file your taxes in 2018, you're only getting $600, right? So the people who need the most are getting the least. And really, the stimulus package, we should be understanding whatever we do today, it's going to take 2 months for that to roll out and hit. So there should be another stimulus package happening right now that is addressing the issues that we're seeing now that are going to get worse in 2 months. And so I'm a little concerned about the lag in the time. And it seems like direct financial contributions, right? Cash stimulus, that's the most impactful thing we could be doing right now. And I see philanthropy trying to step in, but philanthropy can't do what the federal government can do. And so that's the number one issue that I'd like to see addressed, is how do we get money to the front lines, to people's hands much quicker. But I agree, you know, Orion, some of those things are heartening, but I also know that we have a chance to get this right if we get engaged and we shed light on what's happening.
Definitely. Uche, what are your thoughts? Oh, sorry, Uche, you're on mute.
Hit your mute.
Oh, am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're on mute.
Can you hear me? Okay, got it.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, this is it's very loaded in terms of responding to this. Obviously, when we have a national crisis, the initial response to it impacts how I feel about the outcome as we move forward. And it was obvious to me that the initial response coming from the White House has impacted my feelings, and it has impacted what I'm seeing in dealing with the counties and the cities that we cover here and across the state in general. So yeah, it's kind of difficult for me to get excited about anything coming out of this White House. But having said that, I think the stimulus is to me is a step in the right direction, and I look at it as a down payment. We have the largest economy in the world, so $2 trillion is now going to have a huge impact in terms of getting our economy. It's really a well-oiled engine, if I may use that word. And for you to get it running the way it was running before, or it should be running, I think it will require a lot more money, a lot more stimulus package that will do that. But like I said, it's a step in the right direction. And I think some of the good thing there is the money that is going to the small businesses. That got me excited. Some of the workforce related stuff there, employees maintaining their healthcare. That's a very critical thing for me, because when you see people out there with no healthcare, it's one of the things that actually makes your day very, makes it very sad to see that people cannot afford healthcare and take care of their kids. So that's really important for me. And the other thing that I thought is good is employees that are followed from their job, they actually can still get healthcare, and small businesses that meet their payroll, there's funding there for them to continue to actually go on with their business. So the other thing I'm excited is the free coronavirus testing that's in there. It's a lot of small nuances that are in the whole package that we don't know, and been looking through it. And as you know, information are very fluid at this point, and they will continue to be that way. I know for a fact a lot of the banks that these small businesses are supposed to do outreach to are still not clear as to the direction of what to do. So that's, I would have hoped that at this point that there's a clear direction. When you roll this out, you have a clear direction for the banks and the small businesses. That way they don't get confused as to what to do and how to get it done. So I'm excited about those healthcare and unemployment insurance that is there. It's not enough. It's really not enough. When you have this kind of tsunami, I think that's what we just got hit by. It's a big tsunami. So to get our economy rolling, we really need to, and I suspect there will be more stimulus package coming. My suspicion is that it might be coming from more focus on infrastructures than what we're seeing right now. But I think that we're moving in the right direction. There is still some clarity, that things that need to be clear for folks.
Thank you. Those great insights. Christina, could you share your thoughts as well about the stimulus package? 1 second, guy, on Uche.
So sure, like Uche said, I think that it is a step in the right direction, but I don't think that it goes far enough for the people. What I did love about it is the fact that people who are gig workers and freelancers are now, who weren't previously able to apply for unemployment. This creates a temporary pandemic unemployment assistance program. And so we have to be real and honest about like the type of world that we actually live in, and like gig workers and freelancers are just, part of, our workforce. And so they need to be sufficiently supported. I think that what was lacking in this, and the senator from California, Kamala Harris, talks about how she wanted paid sick leave in the stimulus package, and that wasn't in there. And so I know in New York, for example, our state legislature and the governor has signed into law new paid sick leave legislation. And so, just the benefit of that is that it allows people to like not lose their jobs while being able to stay home and stay healthy or whatever. And so I think part of future stimulus packages should provide people that same type of employment protection. I also think that if you want to talk about what does a healthy community mean or incorporate, it means that, you have healthy consumers who have money to spend on things that they need in addition to other things. And so I think that providing people a one-time stimulus check for, $1,200 if you make less than $75,000 is a slap in the face of people who are already living like paycheck to paycheck. It just does not go far enough. I am one of those people who believe in universal basic income. I believe that should be a law in this country. And so I think that the stimulus check, which would help with, stimulating our economy, just doesn't do enough for people. And so I would like to see not just a one-time stimulus check, but continuous payments at a minimum until, we get in a better place. But I would like to see it, just continuously. And I want just talk about the other things that people said that I agree with, but on the healthcare and all that stuff, totally.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina.
Oh, you're welcome.
Karen, would you mind sharing your thoughts as well?
Sure. I co-sign on what all the panelists said. I'm going to speak a little more globally about what really concerns me about the CARE Act. One is I do not trust the White House. I do not trust Senate Republicans. I do not trust the federal government. You know, this White House has gone on a mission to destroy every single cabinet member. Their mission is to destroy the agency that they had. They are trying to break down the government. They hate government. And many positions are unfilled. There's no one working in many positions, and the people in the leadership are highly unqualified political appointees who don't even really understand how government functions. So this is who is administering this. And then they've taken over the federal courts as well. So they now, 1 out of every 4 federal judges is a Trump appointee. Mitch McConnell has been writing to Republican judges who are senior and urging them to retire early to make sure that they can replace them with younger judges who will be able to serve an even longer period of time. So this is the context in which this stimulus was created. And it's also in a context where we already have so much inequality and broken infrastructure. Like half of people are living paycheck to paycheck. We have whole swaths of the people in our society working in the gig economy, where if you don't work, you don't make money. I'm one of them, you know, and already 2020 was a very slow year for me. And so how am I going to pull through all of this? And then you think about the toxic racial inequality and the divide between the top 20% of income earners who are basically hoarding all the opportunities for themselves and everybody else, and how wide it is getting. And you think about, where do most Black and brown people find employment opportunities are actually in small businesses. So listening to small business owners talk about how they can't even figure out how to access this money, they're gonna have to go out of business. Listening to the guy who owns Momofuku, David Chang, one of the most successful restaurateurs in America, saying he does not think the restaurant industry will survive this. And then you think about, well, right now, coronavirus is hitting really hard in blue America, right? The coastal cities and everything, but it is gonna hit later on in red America, and it's gonna be even worse for them because their ratio of people to ICUs and ventilators and doctors is much less. Their healthcare infrastructure is much less than ours. And it is going to really, really hit them. And who do they have leading these states? The governor of Georgia announcing yesterday, he just found out that someone can transmit coronavirus while being asymptomatic. He just learned that yesterday. You have the governors of Florida and Texas saying, oh, we're going to practice social isolation, but churches can go ahead and have services. Are you insane? So, and then I want to take us back to TARP, right? So let's go back to the last time we had a big stimulus package and what happened to racial inequality. Let's not forget what caused the 2008 economic downturn: subprime mortgage loaning to Black and brown first-time home buyers, totally co-signed, led by the federal government with the banks all involved. Then the first-time home buyers saved up all the money that they had, put down their down payment, got sold this crap mortgage. The bank foreclosed. Now the bank owns their home. The bank had sold their mortgage to the hedge funders who traded it back and forth. The whole economy collapsed. Who gets bailed out? The banks, the hedge funders. Do any of them go to jail? No. What happens to the equity that the first-time homebuyers had? It evaporates. Now they're paying rent because then the hedge funds and the private equity swooped in and bought up all those homes. And I totally foresee that just as the 2008 TARP led to greater inequality and greater racial inequality, this stimulus package is the exact same thing. And you hit it on the head. It gives all the payout to the corporations, and none of it, $1,200 that's going to come 6 months from now, that is an insult. People need to feed their kids. And so anyway, sorry, I could go off on this topic, obviously, but I am apoplectic about the stimulus package. Oh, and also, who is going to pay this back? Who is going to pay this back? This is like a generational transfer of wealth from the youngest Americans, from my kids, who are going to be paying this back for the rest of their life, to the old corporations and their shareholders and their CEOs. No, you cannot rob my kids of their future so you can keep your profits.
Appreciate your passion and speaking to the facts that you have taken the time to look into and highlighting those concerns. And I think that's very relevant to the next question, which is, what are some of the similarities in regard to the relief that we received in 2009, and what are some of the differences? I'd like to start with you, Orion, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on that space.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not as familiar with TARP and kind of that earlier or the last stimulus package, but I was kind of doing a little bit of digging earlier, and I have a couple of little thoughts about it. But it seemed like what worked from that last stimulus package, to Karen's point, and I think Alfredo mentioned this as well, is that when you can rely on existing and operable programs, both in the state and local government, and really insert investments and enhance some of the programs that are meeting the communities that have the greatest needs, you're able to have kind of a disaster response and some immediate impacts. And I feel like when you look at the investments through this stimulus package, you're not seeing proportionately dollars going to those programs like they should be. And again, they're going to the big corporations. I think I probably have to lean on the rest of you who maybe have a little more experience with the last stimulus bill, but yeah.
I think you made some great points there in regard to leveraging the current infrastructure or those who are touching the communities, being able to utilize that versus reinventing a new wheel or creating a new wheel. So I'd like to continue this conversation with Alfredo. Can you share your thoughts as well?
I mean, so many things are coming up, right? Like Karen and I agree, inequality increased, right? 2008 through now, it's right. When we had the whole Occupy movement, 1%, Bernie Sanders, everything moving to the left. But the difference between 2008 and 2020 is this is global and this is everyone. The entire world has changed. No one can put their head in the sand and say that this is not going to impact me in my life. And so I think that mindsets are going to shift, and that I hope people are going to see that we're actually in this together, right? It's been very easy to say, hey, look, I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. And, I don't know these other communities who are suffering, but now everyone is going to suffer, right? My neighbors all around me are unemployed. Middle-class people are unemployed. This is 6.6 million people filed for unemployment last week. About 10 million people have filed for unemployment, and 10 more million people are going to be unemployed. Like, this is the biggest crisis we faced since World War II and the Great Depression. And the response that we need to have needs to be as audacious. And so in 2008, it was very much certain sectors of the economy got hit hard and they got their wealth wiped away. I was upside down on my first home I ever had, a condo, lost my down payment. Now I rent. I have not been able to get into this housing market, right? I suffered. Lots of people are like me. My mom lost her retirement, right? She got her whole retirement wiped out. Like, a lot of people got hit. This is going to hit a lot of people, but the response needs to be universal. And that's why universal basic income is actually going to be on the table. That's why we actually should not be looking at 2008. We should be looking at 1932, right? And looking at like what FDR did in response to the Great Depression. You know, we're gonna be coming up on 25% unemployment. You know, this is gonna be huge. And it's not just here, it's Europe, it's China, it's all over the world. And so we're going to be able to do things that we never thought were possible because we're gonna have to, because the need is so bad. And I think more than economic stimulus, we can't even go to work right now. It's how do we pay people to stay home and stay safe so that we can survive? Like we need to put the economy on life support so that once we do, from a medical side, figure out how to come back together, we can actually, you know, like resuscitate us and get back to work. Because I do believe like everyone is biting at the chomp to work. I'm not leaving my house, right? Like I'm on Zoom, right? I'm like flatten the curve, social distancing. This is beautiful. I love seeing your faces. This is like, I don't feel isolated, right? Oh, I see that hug. I like that, right? But this is a moment where we do have to think big. And I don't think that we can just say, federal government, I don't trust them, I don't need them. Like we need the federal government. We need Republicans, we need Democrats, and there's an election coming up in 6 months. And so this president and this Congress is not gonna make all these decisions. This crisis is gonna be with us for years. And so this election is big because that next president is gonna make a lot of the decisions. And so we have to hold our politicians accountable, but we can't do this without the federal government. The federal government is the only one that can generate money out of nowhere. States have to balance their budgets. Counties and local governments rely on tax revenue that is not going to be coming in. It's going to have to come from the federal government. And so I want to figure out how to work with the federal government. And then how do we fill in the gaps the federal government can't provide? But this is a big moment, and I think we should be thinking big.
Thank you, Alfredo. Excellent insights. Uche, would you mind piggybacking off of the things that Karen, Orion, as well as Christina and Alfredo shared so far in regards to similarities between 2009?
Absolutely. I think I could actually talk about this all day, between 2009 and the current situation we're in. And I think the three folks that have spoken already made some really valid points here. But let's look a little bit at both 2009 and the current situation we find ourselves. 2009 we found ourselves in that situation because of corporate hubris. You know, it's not something that it was man-made. We made it. We caused 2009 collapse of our economy. When you have folks there that decided, okay, let's do some gimmickry. You know, let's play around with financial situation. But it was when you have our whole financial sector about to collapse. Our government had to act. I supported the 2009 stimulus package. Obviously, I had some concerns as to how it was, how it was actually rolled out. You know, when you roll out a stimulus package, you have to have a clear plan, a clear direction, a clear strategy as to what you, as a government, what you expect to get back. You know, if you're giving a bank billions of dollars, what do you get back from them? Not only I know that they're paying it back, but if you notice in 2009, the banks had the money, but they refused to hire folks. And that impacted the president so much. So you had the Republicans running these corporations that refused to hire folks, you know, because they were not too happy with the president that actually bailed them out. So yeah, absolutely. We needed to do what we did in 2009, but the banks needed to be saved. We did that. But when you look at this current stimulus package, it's a lot more broad. You know, it's global. Like I think one of the panelists just said, it's very broad. It's very global. Coronavirus doesn't discriminate doesn't, whether you are rich or poor, it's really become, instead of coronavirus, it's become a royal virus, you know? So we've got the Prince Charles in England that tested positive. So this is a virus that is global and require global response to it. Some of my issue with this obviously is the way that it's been rolled out. You know, I don't know if there was a lot of thoughts put into it in rolling it out. It's been a little bit confusing to people already, even though this starts today. Actually, the application starts today. And a couple of banks are doing it, but so the rollout hasn't been done the way I would have anticipated that it's being done. So how will it impact our economy as we move forward? Again, we have the largest economy in the world. So when you are, the whole sector of this economy is impacted, we have to be very strategic as to how we're dealing with that. Large businesses, the small businesses are the areas that I get concerned about. Every time you have collapse of the economy, you see a lot of small businesses that go out of business. And again, this is our economy depends on small businesses. 2 out of every job is created by small business owners. So, and this is coming also from a former small business owner like me. So we have to focus a lot more as to how we deal with small businesses and non-profit organizations that really support our community and families in this country. I think the current administration needs to be a little more intentional when it comes to that. That's really where I look at this. And 2009, because 2009 was more focused on the banks, saving them and not allowing them to collapse. Obviously, pretty much our economy depends on that relationship between banking and us taking the risk, right? That's how we operate. But I think the other thing I'm looking at in this very package is the public sector and private sector relationship that has emerged. I love that. I think in this country, every time we have solved some of our most challenging societal issue, it has been that partnership between government and private sector. So I like what I'm saying. I like the response from them so far, and it's really important that we continue to encourage our private sectors to engage in what they're doing so far. But it's an issue I could go on and talk all day about. So let me stop there.
Awesome, thank you, Uche. Christina, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts, but more importantly, I like for you to focus on what can local government, what can local businesses, what can local leaders do in response to this particular package to make sure that people are well. Let me unmute you real quick. There you go.
Okay. Cool. So one of the things that when I first got into my job as chief of staff, one of the things I said to the senator was that we have an information gap in our community because people come to the office in crisis with various issues, whether they're on the verge of eviction or what have you, and there's all of these governmental agencies and programs that are available to people to actually keep them from entering into a crisis state or whatever. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that local leaders do is get the information out there to the community. So making sure like the small business owners in your community understand what's available to them on a local level, on a state level, on a federal level, to assist them to just put it on a very basic level. I have a close relationship with the person who does my hair. And so when the governor, came out with an announcement that, barbershops and beauty salons and those types of businesses would have to close, I texted him and I was like, hey, here's an article. And he was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that that order had came out. Let me let the managers know and different things like that. And so I told him, I said, send me your email, because my office sends out emails about different things that are available to people. I'm on all of these calls. And so I said, I can't promise you that the small business policies and stuff like that will meet your needs, but I want to make sure that what's available to you, so that you and your colleagues could, have what they need. So I think one is just making sure that people understand the information, that the resources that are out there for them in this time, and take advantage of it. And I think that's the job of local leadership to do that. I think secondly, advocating on behalf of those people in your community to improve policies, to improve resources, to improve laws, to improve packages, so they actually, meet people's needs. So I've been on calls. The city small business services agency has done calls. And so one of the things that elected officials and their staff will talk about is things that small business owners are saying in their communities. So for example, they have, a $75,000, loan that they'll give to a business. And so, people on the call were like, people actually need grants, not loans. That's actually not going to help our people in this moment. And so how do we do things where people can get more grants, where there's more grant opportunities available to people than actual loans? One of my, good friends, she is a business owner. She has a sole proprietorship. And so every time something, small business oriented comes out, I talked to her, and she was like, you know what, Christina, this actually doesn't help me. And this is actually, what we need or whatever. I think the reason why we see in the current stimulus package, resources for gig workers and people like that is because I saw, for example, a state assemblywoman and different people raising the alarm, saying that these people need to be helped in this moment. And so one is getting the information out to people. Two is advocating on their behalf for the proper legislation and package that actually helps them where they are.
Understand. Thank you very much. Good work. Orion, can you share your thoughts in regard to the local response in terms of from a workforce development perspective, or any other insights you can offer there?
Yeah, sure. So I think I can speak on behalf of San Francisco, and I think some of the efforts that Mayor London Breed has put in place have really been lockstep with everything coming from Sacramento, and I think that is one of the reasons that in terms of public health, the Bay Area's curve has been, it's not exacerbated like it has been in other areas.
We follow the rules.
Yeah, that's right. Alfredo is a perfect example of that. Everyone should be more like him. But I think, one thing that I do understand about this package is that states have a lot of authority and autonomy to do what they want in terms of distributing those dollars. And so having a very competent governor is a blessing right now. And then in San Francisco, having Mayor London Breed in charge and being able to utilize those dollars and enhance programs that she's already had in place using federal funds, and then also expending, our general fund as much as she can to put supports in place for all of the different vulnerable populations. We've got small business grants and loans. We've got childcare covered for a lot of the city. We've got paid sick leave. We've even got aid for the arts community. I think that those are all good strategies. But again, going back to what Alfredo was talking about earlier, this is all just an immediate response to this crisis and what we've got now, but what's the long game? And that's gonna have to come out of the federal level again. And I think, your idea around a New Deal type effort, public works, maybe the Green New Deal, we're gonna need job creation. We're gonna need to distribute, wealth, to a greater number of people than have historically received it. So, I think we're doing a good job here in the Bay Area, but this is just going to get us so far, and we need some really big ideas to get the country back in order.
Thank you, Orion. Karen, can you share your insights in regard to what you think the local response should be from government, private sector, nonprofits to complement the federal stimulus package?
Well, I, you know, as soon as this is over, I'm going to be protesting in front of Nancy Pelosi's office. You know, that's what I think the real demand. We have to face our public officials, and we have to get drilled in. Are we going to have the 2020 election? One thing we haven't talked about is that the stimulus did not provide funding for the United States Postal Service. As it stands now, the United States Postal Service has enough money to operate until June. They may have to shut down. Now, to me, that is what the Republicans want, is to not have the 2020 election. And you can imagine that, like, we're gonna have to vote by mail.
But
so,
Karen, on that point,
this is really significant.
Karen, on that point, if we don't have the election, guess who becomes president of the United States?
Who?
Nancy Pelosi.
Oh, yeah.
If there is no election, the Speaker of the House becomes the president of the United States.
Really?
So
by the Constitution?
I believe by the Constitution. So that is not an option. Now, suppressing the vote, that's something real. But if there is no election, welcome President Pelosi.
Wow. I know that she replaced, like, if Trump died and Pence died, she becomes president that way. But I didn't know that, like, if there's no election, she would honor it. So maybe there's some incentive for them to have the election. But I am terrified about what is going on with the election in the backdrop of all of this. And I agree with you 100%. We're going to need a New Deal type response. But let's even look at what happened as a result of the New Deal. The New Deal exacerbated racial inequality. In order to get the Southern senators to sign on to the New Deal, they exempted domestic workers, all kinds of workers that were primarily workers of color were not eligible for the New Deal. Farm workers, you know, so this is why those folks, that is a huge driver of the racial wealth gap that we have today. Today, if present trends continue, median Black net wealth will be 0 by 2053. Median Latinx net wealth will be 0 by 2073. And when you really unpack what is white privilege, it is the intergenerational wealth transfer that was initiated by policies created hundreds of years ago, and slavery and land theft and genocide. But I think about the reason why I'm a middle class homeowner is because my great grandfather got off the boat from France, made his way to Western Nebraska, and bought 360 acres of land for $60. You know, anyway, so when I say, and I hear you, we can't say we need them, we need the Senate Republicans, we need to all, but when I say I do not trust them, I do not trust them, because their entire strategy is to drive up racial hatred. That is their election strategy. That is how Trump got elected. And I do not trust them to create something that is going to address racial inequality. And this is why my outreach is to fellow white people to understand, because we are the majority. You know, Trump got elected by 66% of white men and 53% of white women. And white women, you know, we made up 42% of the electorate in 2016. So we have to shift and come over to the side of people of color and build a multiracial coalition to get people in power who are going to address these issues, or it's just gonna, I don't know. This is what I lay awake at night thinking about.
Thank you, Karen. Definitely a very intense topic to address because there's many layers, historical challenges, present challenges. And when we think about this particular stimulus package, for us to ignore the equity component will be naive of us. So I thank you for speaking very clearly to that particular topic.
Thank you.
With that said, Alfredo, I know you had some deep insights in regard to local response, and would love for you to share that as well.
Yeah, I'll just say, I wish we could drink coffee, drink a beer. I would love to spend more time with all of you because there's so much that we have to talk about. In terms of the local response, this past week, so I'm a small business owner, I'm an entrepreneur. Everything I was doing shut down. I was working on this career pathway work in Silicon Valley, connecting opportunity youth to tech. Everything stopped, everything pivoted. You know, I was like worried, like, am I gonna have work? I was able to get a new contract, and it was some of the most fascinating work that I've ever been a part of. It was with a cannabis industry that's starting in Richmond, Power Plant Park, and they are starting a foundation, and they wanted to develop a COVID-19 response. And so I got a team together and we did community engagement this past week in the city of Richmond. And virtually, one of my colleagues went to food pantries and interviewed homeless folks, and we got a lot of perspectives. We did about 35 interviews, and we just created a report and we just submitted it to Power Plant Park. But we talked to the city, we talked to a bunch of CBO stakeholders. And what was fascinating is the people who need this the most, undocumented people, the elderly, homeless, transitional age youth, the most vulnerable folks in our communities are not being addressed. When my colleagues went out and were talking with people, they said, you're the first person who has asked us what we need, right? They're the ones who don't have food. They don't have a place to shower. There are homeless folks who are getting the coronavirus, but they can't quarantine themselves. And so we were trying to identify shovel-ready projects, and we identified like 5 shovel-ready projects in the city of Richmond, one of which Greater Richmond Interfaith Program, like they need like $11,000 to access a county fund to get a unoccupied hotel to quarantine infected homeless folks, right? Those are the kinds of issues that right now the food pantries don't have volunteers, because many of the food pantry volunteers are seniors, and the seniors can't go out and do that volunteer work. And so everyone is sheltering in place and we're at home, but when you don't have food in your house, you have to go out and you have to get food, but the food pantries are having trouble with the food delivery. A lot of the churches provide the real immediate on the ground supports, but the churches aren't open. They're not collecting their offerings on Sundays. So the church pantries are shutting down. The immediate, what we need right now is like emergency response, and we have to find a way to get funding to the frontline organizations, not new organizations, the folks who have been doing this for decades, the community folks who have been, feeding their community for decades. That's who needs help. And so a lot of it is just, how do we foster communication, collaboration? This report, once we get it approved, we don't want to keep it. We want to share it with the city. We want to share it with other CBOs. And we have to do more listening to people on the ground. What do they really need? I don't know what everyone needs. They know what they need though. And so how do we elevate those voices? And I do believe that if we show love and compassion, and we do what we're supposed to do, look out for our neighbors and look out for our fellow men and women and citizens and non-citizens, right? The people who are left out, the undocumented, right? Is it 15 million Americans are undocumented? They're not any federal stimulus. They're not gonna get access to anything. So how do we support them? We have to do a lot more listening, and that's how we're gonna learn how we actually respond. But Orion, you're lucky. San Francisco, you're loaded. You got Tipping Point Foundation. You got all the money in the world. No one is giving Richmond the love that San Francisco and Oakland gets. Hayward, Richmond, East San Jose, they don't get the same love. Forget about Modesto and other folks. So we have some work to do.
Thank you, Alfredo. That was great.
Wesley, can I chip in on that for a second?
Please,
Obviously,
please.
He's talking about my district here, so I need to. But he's made some pretty good point. But let me just do some clarify some things there. I served on GRIP board for many years until recently I resigned. But in terms of the hotels, there are the county. One of the things that our office do on a daily basis, weekly basis, we engage the county, we engage the cities, every city in our district, including Richmond. And by the way, I live in Richmond. So if there are issues that you have come up that needed city or if the county or the state attention, please bring it up to me. And we will address that. Our office has been very, very engaging to the community and very active. One of the great things that I know, because working for somebody who was a community organizer before, the Assemblywoman came from that community organizing mode. So she cares a lot about what happens in the community. So so we have our ears to the ground here. So if there are issues that you think are being ignored, especially at this time of crisis, please bring it up to me. I will help the best way we can. But there are, just to give you some clarity, the county has a lot of hotel rooms that have been assigned specifically for people who have tested, homeless people who have tested positive for this virus. There are hotel rooms, plenty of them. I know that for a fact because I've been in those conversations. So if anyone that you know of there that is homeless that have tested positive, there are rooms for them. That's not an issue at this point. So in terms of the what you're doing at GRIP, I appreciate that. So if there are ways that you think we can help with that, please let me know. We can help you with that. And in terms of also the churches and the pantries drying up, that's something that we're seeing across. So, and so we are doing our best in terms of how we can help them with what they need, resources. Our office is doing a pretty good outreach with from Oakland all the way to Hercules. If there are issues that you have come up regarding homeless people, please bring it up to us. So just wanted to clarify those things.
Glad to be connected, Uche,
Sure,
and
sure.
I'll share what we learned with your office.
Sure.
So just a question for anyone on the panel: how do we ensure that those who are in the know aren't the only ones who benefit from the information and the resources that are being created? I know that Christina mentioned earlier that she's been engaging on an individual basis with people that she knows and her stakeholders, but there's a lot of activity happening at a high level, and how do we make sure that it water falls to those on the ground? It kind of goes back to what Alfredo mentioned in terms of engaging and asking people what do they need, and that's one component. But if stuff is already happening, if the application is already available and people don't know where to go to fill out the application, then there's a huge disconnect. So any thoughts there in regard to how we can address that challenge? Anyone?
So let me jump in there since but I think at this point, when we're going through crisis, information is really premium. It's one of the most important things that we can do for our communities is continuously engage them. We don't want folks who are rich or who have the means of engaging and finding information to have stuff. We want those homeless folks who are in the street there, who can't even get 3 meals a day, to also know that there are support out there for them. So, how we're doing that is really engaging from a federal, state, county, local level. We have ongoing daily conference call. Thanks to Zoom, we're doing a lot of Zoom. On a weekly basis, I do probably 3 or 4 conferences or Zoom. And it's really important to engage the nonprofit organizations because they have an ear to the ground as to what's going on. There's plenty of them in our district here that we engage on a daily basis. Is to make sure that what we know that we share it with them. I give you an example. There's a nonprofit here called Latina Center in Richmond. I constantly send information to the executive director that way. And it's predominantly Latinos that cannot speak English. I constantly send information from a state level through the county level to her so that she can communicate it to her community, because they trust her. Information coming from her means a lot more than information coming directly from me. So that's really one of the things that people have to know is the person communicating to these folks, do they trust that person? It's really important to give the information to the right person, that would the people receiving it trust that it's coming from the right person. So that's what we're doing. Again, our door is always open, even though our office is not open. We constantly engage nonprofits here, and the ones that people who know me in the district, so they reach out even when I'm not working. So that's the great thing about it. So I never stop working. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage there. But yeah, so we are constantly engaging the electeds and the nonprofits here. So
just real quick, how can people engage? How can people take a proactive step to engage with those who are creating the resources or providing means to serve them? What are things that they can do? The local citizen, the local business.
It's really, yeah, absolutely. It's really calling. Sometimes it takes one phone call to get things going for you. There are projects that we're doing out there that we don't really talk about because when you see some hand sanitizers being passed to the homeless folks in the out there in our district, we are involved in that. We're making sure that they get certain things they need, but we're using the local nonprofit organization to make sure that they get those hand sanitizers to make sure that they're being safe. So it's really we have this access to the information, we have access to the resources, but we make sure that those things go down to the right people. That will even in our district here, you have the supervisor here. He's very active, very involved. So it's reaching out to the Assemblywoman's office. It's reaching out to the supervisor's office. If you don't know our contact information, you ask somebody else. I think these things are accessing this. The informations are out there. You just need to take that next step to reaching out to us.
Appreciate that. Want to leave some time for the attendees who have some questions. Joe, if you're still on the line, I'm gonna allow you to talk to ask your question. So you're live, Joe.
I think I unmuted. Can
Yes,
you
you
hear me?
are. Yes, we
hear
can.
you, Joe.
Hey,
I
folks.
can hear you. Yeah.
Hey, this has been a good discussion. Just want to echo Alfredo's point. I think this is, I think looking backward, I mean, except maybe to the Great Depression, but the Great Recession and TARP, I don't think is a good point of comparison. That was really, as people already elucidated, that was driven by predatory lending, greed, and a combination of I think, it's easy to point the finger at big banks. There was some combination colliding in the middle of personal greed too. This is literally a global pandemic, right? And where nobody's really done anything wrong, at least within an economic context. And so, this has to be a yes and as we're seeing extreme spread in a lot of red states now. I think pointing fingers at the other side or really making a lot of claims about other people's intentions is a pretty rough approach. And so just would really encourage everybody to shy away from that at this time. But, I think what was missed in this conversation, I joined about 10 minutes late, but there wasn't much discussion of unemployment insurance in that for the sort of pretty phenomenal increase of $600 per week on top of, what might be around $300. In a lot of cases, a lot of communities, extensions of like 13 weeks. So now we're talking about $4,000 a month for a lot of folks for up to 6 months, and in some places even longer. I think that is the real economic stimulus, and that is trickle up stimulus. People aren't going to be, I'm not like, buying new sweatshirts, but I am paying my mortgage, and that money flows to Chase and flows up, through the economy that way. So I think there's a lot of, that's where we need to be focusing our attention. The stimulus payment is paltry, and it's not really in America's nature to do that kind of thing. So I think that's just going to be something that got thrown out. But how do we think about really encouraging the maintenancing of that high a level of unemployment insurance, and also think about creative solutions like immediate enrollment, that, some sort of way in which the second you tell government that you lost your job, the next day you're auto enrolled, no verification. We can do that later and claw money back from cheaters. But that $4,000 a month is real. That is substantive. So I think it's that, and then there's going to be, I think what I hope, we know there's going to be a stimulus package too, and I would just really put forward that a lot of the dialogue today, we need to think about ways to actively get the learnings from this into the next stimulus package. And just, I feel like we really need to be in a place of grace and graciousness with one another right now. And a lot of this, I would argue, does not align with my politics or how things have been done correctly, but in the way that, billionaires who have foundations the Gates Foundation has many hundreds of professional staff, because it's actually hard to give away money, or it can be. And you're hearing right now, the unemployment system is breaking down. It's just, we don't have the actual infrastructure to get money out the door. And so I think, how do we think about the learnings from this? How do we increase access? How do we get money to small businesses? How do we do all those things? And how do we address the infrastructure and sort of like the technical processes to make money move? So that's all my comments, but I appreciate the dialogue today. I'm just grateful you all were able to get together and organize this type of conversation, because I think more of this is needed as we all collectively make sense of this. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Would anyone of the panelists want to respond to his comments, especially in regard to sorry about that. Unemployment insurance? Christina, please go ahead.
Yes. So thank you, Joe, for all of the comments that you made. And so one thing I will say is that we were on the verge of an economic recession before this pandemic. So for months and months and months, people have been warning that something like this would happen. So for those people who were paying attention, they expected this, but they did not expect it based off of a pandemic. And so our economic system was already extremely vulnerable. And so I think that this provides us an opportunity to do a lot of the things that we need to do in order to create a stronger economy overall, or whatever. So one thing I've heard, a comment someone said was that Lindsey Graham said that people would be making more money now on unemployment than they were making before. And so, as if that is an excuse to not give people more money when we are living in a time of immense income and wealth inequality. I worked for New York City's Department of Homeless Services, where you had, the majority of people who are homeless are, families with children. There were like 30% of that population was actually working, but just wasn't making enough. The fact that the minimum wage in this country is $7.25. And right now, I actually just researched this. They said that if it would have kept up with inflation and different things like that, minimum wage should actually be $17 and something cents right now. And so So I just think that, and we're also just in a different economic environment in general. So for example, you know, a lot of jobs are being lost to tech and different things like that, and what's going to continue to happen. And so what I think the place that we find ourselves now in this country is how do we create a government and an economy that takes into consideration the 21st century realities that people are living in, and create a governmental system of support for people. And so that's just kind of, I could go on and on and on, because like that's like my top, you know, issue. It's like ending poverty and income and wealth inequality and different things like that. But I think that the fact that, you know, people needed more unemployment insurance. People need, you know, more stimulus. People just needed more in general, because people were living off of an insufficient amount or whatever. And so, for example, I know another statistic is that even before this, 40% of Americans couldn't afford a $400 emergency payment, right? So I think the reason why, like, you know, things are toppling so fast is because we were already so vulnerable. And so I think that we need to understand the economics of the 21st century, and offers, you know, policies and solutions to address those in the pandemic and outside of a pandemic.
Thank you. Appreciate your response. Anybody else have a response to what Joe shared? Okay, Karen, I see you. Hold on. There you go.
I'll respond to, you know, trusting folks' intentions. You know, it's really hard for me to trust Senate Republicans' intentions when their disclosures show that they sold off their stock portfolio. And the same Senator Loeffler who sold off her stock portfolio when she found out about coronavirus invested in a company that makes medical protective gear. They found out about this in January, okay? Trump knew about this in January. They should have been planning mass testing. That's what we needed. If we had mass testing, then we wouldn't have had to shut down the entire economy, because we could have tested everybody, done the self-quarantine for 2 weeks, and then gotten back to work. But instead, we have this very haphazard approach, and he's on TV every single day telling lies to the American people. So how on earth, how can we trust or respect anything that he has to say when it's factually inaccurate? So I'm not going to start trusting him because I need, you know, out of the goodness of my heart. Trust has to be earned, and I'll start trusting them when they start behaving in a way that's trustworthy.
Gotcha.
So Wesley, I'm going to make a point, because I think I know what Joe is getting to, and that's that this is a very New York City Bay Area conversation, right? This is New York City and the Bay, who are, right, tied at the hip, right, in terms of how we view the world. I was born in New York City, been living in the Bay for, 12 years, and I know that we live in a bubble, right? This is a bubble, and I do believe this is a time we need to get out of our bubbles. And I'm not talking, right, Karen, I want to hang out with you. You're a fascinating person. But it's in terms of, like, how do we engage the federal government, and how do we think bigger? How do you win a 2020 election? Pointing fingers and doing the whole partisan thing that we're stuck in. Like, we're stuck in these ruts. We got to get out of our ruts. We need to be able to build relationships with people that we've never built relationships with before. We have to care about people because we need people to care about us and our community. And so I do encourage us to, like, let's not look at, I mean, we did so many things wrong with this, and we're going to continue doing things wrong, but this stimulus package did some good things. We have a lot of learning to do, and we have to shape whatever comes next. But I'm also not relying, and we shouldn't rely on the federal government to save us, right? We all are doing things every day to help our communities, to stay connected with one another, and that it's up to us what happens, right? Nothing is set in stone. This could increase inequality. This could create a better world like we've never seen before. So let's make the world that we want it to be, but let's be open-minded that let's work with people that we never worked with before. Let's get through the difficult political stuff that we couldn't do because we didn't trust each other. Let's give people the benefit of the doubt, and let's try. Let's try.
Thank you, Alfredo. I'd like to address a question from Danielle. Her question was, what role do you foresee educational organizations playing in workforce development and addressing some of the racial inequalities? And Orion, if you wouldn't mind, I know you're in the workforce space, and I think that potentially you may have some insights there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, so in California, for example, I know that we invest 60 times more money in youth education than in adult learning and training. And I think we really want to take a look at that, right? Because if you compare that number to how many high school students go on to get a bachelor's degree, which is about a third of all high school students, what you recognize is that this whole college for all idea has failed, at least in California. And most people are having to access, some form of training later in life, or they just don't access any higher education or training. So I think until, community colleges can start to have a little more accountability around employment outcomes and work closer with industry and provide more contextualized learning, it's hard for the state to invest more in those programs, although I think we're not going to be able to serve, the 2/3 of folks that do not go off to college appropriately without increasing investments at that higher education level. So I think there is potential there, but without, a lot of our programming at the community college level being a little more industry-led, it's tough to make that argument. California is unique in that a lot of our federal WIA and WIOA dollars don't go directly to community colleges, and a lot of that work is contracted out to nonprofit organizations who we feel sometimes are better at meeting a community's needs. But I think if we can get to a point where we've got those public-private partnerships at an education level, we would love to see more investments in community colleges.
Hey, Wesley, we're nearing the 1:30 mark, and I've got kids who are about to be here any second, and they're right behind me right now. But I want to say that we are going to continue these community forum conversations on Fridays, and education is very going to come up next week. We're going to be talking about the digital divide. We want to talk about how we're going to help the class of 2020 transition to college, which is going to be a huge issue. How are educators adapting to remote learning? How are small businesses going to access those SBA loans, all those kinds of things. But I'm going to have to hop off. But I really appreciated what everyone had to say, the folks who joined us, as attendees, and, I hope we can keep these conversations going, but appreciate all of you.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating. Everything's happening in real time. We're learning each day. We're trying to figure out how we can best support each other, and let's keep the dialogue going and share resources. And thank you guys for your time, and thank you to the attendees. Everyone stay well, take care of your families.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.